Well, as you heard on the news, several unions representing federal public workers are calling on the Harper government to scrap provisions in a bill on budget implementation. One of those unions, the Public Service Alliance of Canada, says Bill C-4 essentially guts the right to collective bargaining, eliminates important human rights protections, and will make every federal workplace less safe for its workers and the Canadians they serve. Bob Jackson is the Regional Vice President for PSAC. We spoke with him earlier today.
It is the latest in a series of ongoing activities, I guess, by this government that they've undertaken for quite some time now. I can't say that it's a total surprise what we're seeing. I think that it's fair to say that nothing really surprises us with this government anymore, given some of the decisions that they made and some of the actions that they've taken so far.
This is all wrapped up in an omnibus bill, of course, which is something that the Harper government seems to like. You get items that are scarcely related to each other all in one bill. So what's contained in this one that threatens the rights of labor?
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, they like to package these things up in these massive bills, 300, 400, or 500-page documents that people have difficulty reading through. And they bury a lot of this stuff in there and you're quite right, things that are totally unrelated. It's a tactic, I think, more than anything else, rather than sitting down. And this is one of the points that really bothers us. They don't they seem to be willing to sit down with the people that are actually doing the work to talk about changes that can be made. That's a huge problem. Taking unilateral decisions, I think, is a major problem. Whenever one party just decides to do something and with virtually no consultation, which is something that we've had in all of our dealings with our employers over the past years, that seems to be going by the wayside. This government seems to be quite okay with removing and undermining democratic rights of public sector workers. In terms of being able to bargain collectively, to sit down at a table and talk about things. They would just rather put out a document and roll back the state of labor relations, 30, 40 years. This particular fight is about us as public sector workers and what the employer is doing. But I think if you look at it in larger terms, what's happening is that there's a change happening in our country. The fabric of what we have come to recognize as Canadians is changing. This whole idea of developing proposals secretly, behind closed doors and then springing them on people, taking away such basic things as, health and safety rights, human rights protections put through in the Canada Labour Code, revisions with respect to the definition of danger, those types of things. And it's irreparable damage that's being done. They're taking away infrastructure. Shutting down the Kitsilano Coast Guard base in downtown Vancouver was a clear example of not only not listening to us in the labor movement, but not listening to Canadians in general. They made a decision, and it was going to happen, and there was a lot of public outcry over that decision, as you recall.
What does this bill contain? What are some of the more, egregious aspects of it?
Well, like I said, they want to make changes to the Canada Labour Code, which is going to make it very difficult for people to identify dangerous work situations.
Right now, what can you do if there's a perceived dangerous work situation?
People have the right to refuse dangerous work and have it investigated. If necessary, have a third party come in from Labour Canada to have a look at that situation and determine whether or not it is safe. What they've done here is removed a lot of those provisions and made it a situation where if somebody refuses, that can be used against them and would potentially threaten their livelihood. They could end up being disciplined or summarily fired for doing something that they thought was genuinely dangerous. And so that's a huge, huge step backwards.
Well, the right to refuse unsafe work, of course, was a hard-fought one.
Absolutely.
And not all that old, really.
No, it was fairly recent changes. There was a massive number of changes that took place to the Canada Labour Code several years ago. And that was negotiated with Labour and the government sitting down and talking about that and coming to a reasonable solution. That's clearly not happened here. And the other thing that they've done is this unilateral right that they've given themselves to designate employees as essential and to determine which route of dispute resolution or collective bargaining is going to take place. They're going to put everybody on a conciliation strike route. If there's no way that you can reach an agreement that would push people into a strike, then they're going to restrict who can go on strike. So they're basically controlling all aspects of collective bargaining, and they're taking away the ability for unions to sit down at a bargaining table and come to a mutual agreement on things, which has been the practice for years.
Now, if there's essential service levels set in the case of a job action, the union and the employer sit down and sort of negotiate, right, what's essential and what isn't, and they're now changing it to just being, as you said, unilateral on the part of the government. They can just designate it, and that's that.
Well, Tony Clement, he was involved in a radio interview a couple of weeks ago on CBC, and he was asked that question, and he said, well, it was about to bring more balance. Right now there's too much power in the hands of the unions, and the person who was interviewing him said, well, it seems reasonable to me if you have two people sitting down at a table to determine something, that is balance. So he wasn't able to answer that question. I think he showed, his true colors during that interview.
So two things, the Declaration of Essential Services and the right to refuse unsafe work being definitely compromised. Anything else in this bill that we should watch out for?
Well, I think that, the whole idea about being able to collectively bargain issues, they would like to strip away things that are already in collective agreements, such as sick leave, for instance. They've targeted that in a very pointed way, where they've, through themselves and through other folks, such as the Canadian Federation of Independent Business and other like groups, they've come up with these figures that supposedly public sector workers are using all these days of sick leave in a year. A lot of it has been proven to be nonsense. Say that the average number that I heard was 18.2 days a year, which is ridiculous. I mean, we can point to hundreds and hundreds of examples of public sector workers that don't use sick leave at all. Many of the numbers that they're referring to include things like people that are on long-term disability, waiting for long-term disability program to kick in. People could be recovering from surgery. There could be a whole wide variety of things. The government is making it out to be, that the public services are, just lying around and waiting to phone in sick. It's ridiculous. Then they go out, and once they create that illusion and tell people, well, this is what the Canadians are telling us. This is what the electorate is telling us. So we're going to take action on this. That's not what the electorate's telling them at all. So there's a lot of fabrication, outright deception that's going on.
Now, you put out a statement on this along with several other federal unions, right? What sort of things besides a public statement? Is there any plans, campaign or anything to fight this, to bring it to the public's attention?
Our campaign that we have been running for the past number of months, it's called We Are All Affected. So part of that campaign is to reach out to the public and to have discussions with members of the public at many opportunities whenever we have activities where we will set up a booth where we can talk to people. And we have these one-on-one discussions, and people can voice what they've heard, and we can give them a fair and honest rebuttal to some of the things that are being proposed out there. We're also asking people to have conversations with the MP in their constituency, regardless of what political stripe they might carry, to have a conversation, and if they are from the government in power, that we ask those MPs to explain what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it. Although they would like you to believe that cracking down on the use of sick leave is going to save billions of dollars to the economy, it's nonsense. We would like to have people have those conversations with their MPs. If it's an MP that is not of the Conservative Party, that we have that conversation with them and make sure that our views are understood so that they can carry that message into the House during debate. So there's quite a wide variety of activities that we have been involved in and will continue to be involved in with the We Are All Affected campaign. And I stress again, it's not just about what's happening, to federal public sector workers. it's about what's happening to all of us as Canadians.
Thanks very much for this, Bob.
Okay, you're very welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That was Bob Jackson. He's the BC Regional Vice President for the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Bob says that the government will likely put this bill for a vote sometime before Parliament recesses for Christmas. I'm Dan Keaton. You're listening to Union Made on Vancouver Co-op Radio CFRO at 100.5 FM.